Oh my goodness, Kenya. So I want to say that I was much more excited for today's conversation than I was for last time because I was so much more nervous about kind of getting into it. And now we're
Mm-hmm.
in it.
Mm-hmm. We're in it.
We're in it. We're already in it. And I was nervous about every stage of it. I was nervous about recording it. I was nervous about editing it. I was nervous about posting it. And all that is done.
Yep.
And so now anyone who is listening is just in it with us. The only thing I was nervous about today was my normal thing of sitting down and being like, which jewelry do I have that looks, the worst? And of course, you start at the worst and then you work your way out of the danger zone into like acceptable.
Well,
Um,
I did a wash day, and so I'm like letting it be free, and so that's
uh-huh.
what I'm working with today. I am feeling good. I mean, I like everybody is trying to use whatever tools they have to get through whatever this is that's happening. That
Right,
feels very like I don't feel alone in all of this. I feel very
right.
much like this is a state of mind that is at least universal to a American capitalist context.
Yeah. So when you say, just for clarity, then, when you
Mm.
say all of this, like, would you like to elaborate on what you're referring to, just for anyone who might not realize?
Um,
For,
I I'm not feeling as much anxiety, but there is kind of a muted quality to um like it's very dense. I was talking to a friend about this. Like I've been maybe not like a lot of people, but some people I've been doing some job hunting. I just want to get like a regular schmegular degular job so I can do my artwork and I don't have to like talk to 20 people who are going to tell me no because they don't get what I'm trying to do. And I just rather pay for it myself and do it. But it's like it's the muck of it
hmm
doesn't it feels very cloying, and it doesn't feel like it's just in one area. It feels like it is in a multitude of, whether it's like yeah, like things that should be simple, like this whole writer strike. Like I'm just like the money is there.
Right.
Like it
Yes.
why
It's like
why are we
the ability to complicate things rests in the hands of too few people
yes,
who have like real
yes,
power. I think about that a lot because you're in Florida, yes.
yes.
And Florida, additionally to the other things you're talking about, is like making like national headlines daily right now for like a series of overreaches and like alerts are going off like all over the place. And I can't even imagine, like, it's hard when you're experiencing that from like under the dome. That's how I felt like in 2020 with stuff that was happening here in LA. And it was just like, protests and wildfires and, everything happening in the span of like really fast. And I was like, I don't even know how to talk to people outside of the dome about how it feels like inside of the dome, except for all I know is they're very worried about me,
Yeah.
for whatever that's worth.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think people, people often ask me, are you okay? How are you feeling? And it's like, I I think that there's a lot of there's danger in this insistence upon locality,
hmm
that it's only happening in this one place and all of that kind of stuff, because I'm like, this is just uh um a flashpoint, like, with like the fires, for example, they are a product of climate change and global warming. Like, and that
hmm
is like a climate, it's an atmosphere, it's around the globe. But because it has this flashpoint, and because, like I was talking to a friend yesterday about who's from Delhi, and he was saying how he's like lived with asthma for a large portion of his life, and and it's been on steroids. And he's like, even though he's lived in LA, he was like, I never even had to use my inhaler. And that's like the, smoggiest like we use that as a
Right.
flashpoint, but it is
Right.
so indicative of the fact that it feels like a distraction that is again making it more dense, because it's like, oh, we can fixate on this one space, not considering that this is the like it's the girdle of a lot of spaces, whether
Right.
it's, like that's not the only place that these things happen. And I
Right.
think that understanding it makes me more concerned about everybody and less concerned about like this little sliver or
Right.
big
Right.
sliver.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like no matter where you are and how bad things might be where you are, there's always someone somewhere else that you're worried about, right? Uh, so before we move on into talking about tarot and on the subject of you looking for jobs, mentioned earlier I wanted to highlight, while we're doing this ongoing discussion about tarot, I wanted to remind people that, for example, that you are available for bookings.
Yes, I
You're
am.
always you're always very good at reminding people because you come out here and you share what you're thinking about or working on, and then you're good at kind of sprinkling mentions and saying, also, you may contact me and I will work with you. So why don't you just first of all talk a moment about how you prefer to be contacted and just like what you're putting out there. So if anyone is listening and was like, I would like to work with Kenya on something, and get a reading or whatever, then they will have right from you how to do that.
So, just DM me. I have a little for so I have kind of two ways of thinking about this. And until like for Gemini season, I figured it's a little celebration. You can get a little taste. I'm doing 1, 2, and 3 card readings.
Mm-hmm.
The 1 card is 6, the 2 is 9, and the 3 is 12.
Dollars.
Yes, USD. Dolores. And
Yes.
I am very flexible for people's timing. I've actually done some readings internationally, which has been great. And we just like figure out when that is. Um, so that's one, and then I have that's more connected to like my overall practice is like um pay what you will.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's about like the first time I work with someone, I do this like 9 card portrait spread, and it ends up being like, I don't know, like usually an hour, sometimes 90 minutes of just, working through it. And I really enjoy that. I like, I do some, how would I say, like I do some research on the person. I ask them for their like birth name, the name that they like to be called, their birth date, and yeah, and then we figured that out. And I use that, like I make this whole watercolor based on that information that I'm researching, and then we have this reading that usually
like a
like
literal like a literal watercolor painting.
yeah, like not like it's not it's like I write the notes in preparation, but I do it in watercolors.
Okay. See,
And
this is amazing because this is all stuff that I don't know about how you operate.
oh yeah, yeah. And sometimes people like I always send them a picture of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the spread itself. And usually I'll put some notes and stuff. But sometimes I people ask for it and I'll send it to them. I'll just mail it to them. But I make a scan just because a lot of times I will be able to reference like if they work with if we work together again, then I can reference like the time, the date, like I'll have all of that. So if something comes up again, I'll already know that in like my little notes and everything. So I've only had a couple of folks, well, like maybe 3 or 4 people that I've had that experience of like being able to like mine that first portrait spread, but you
Hmm.
know, that way you don't have to be burdened with like a question or, we just want to get an overview that first
Yeah.
meeting, which is why I say pay what you will.
So this is interesting because like we had talked about today, kind of doing today's conversation about our just like respective practices and just, I wanted to like interview you kind of about yours and like you can talk to me about mine. And I like
Yeah.
this because like even in this preamble, like the availability and the style of availability and the whole thing is just like is just like an interesting difference between how we work.
So
Because
how
well, so maybe I'll talk about this later when I'm talking about my coin project, but like I
mm,
have really struggled over the years in terms of offering any availability whatsoever because I am like relatively camera shy. So things like Zoom and FaceTime and stuff have always been difficult for me in terms of like the vibe for readings, especially with strangers. Um, it's just like an additional layer that like interferes with my being able to like my confidence in what I'm doing. Like I'm very good at sitting down with someone face to face, and I'm very good at doing everything in writing. And so I've been for many years now doing this kind of subscription service where I was offering readings like weekly or monthly readings that I would just like send somebody a card and I would like write down not an answer to a question. It's not a Q&A service. I always stress because
mm.
I don't want to, it's affordable and I want to keep it affordable for me time and energy wise by having it just like one off where I draw the card and I send you a beautiful photo of the card and then I write like about 100 words just like about the card in a kind of like an expansive and accessible way of being like this week or this month. And I have some clients that I have been doing this for nonstop for like 5 years, weekly or monthly. And I was doing it through Patreon for a while, and then they updated their tax stuff in a way that I thought was rather punishing. So I moved away from that, and I've just been doing it off-roading it ever since. And being able to, like for me, writing is my greatest tool. And being able to express myself in writing with a moment to reflect and choose words or look something up, is like a really good way for me to give someone a thing that they can like you're talking about with the stuff that you give that they can reference later. And it also helps me keep track. So people, when I'm reading them monthly or weekly or whatever, I can look back over the past series of stuff and be like, wow, I sent you this card exactly a month ago or twice in the last year, and it gives us kind of room to dig in a little bit. So writing was ideal, and then otherwise in person. And then that was just totally kneecapped from 2020 onward. Not that I was doing lots of it, but we talked a little last time about how I did an event, like I worked a party for the first time and really forced myself to get in there and kind of break the seal, and how gratifying that was. So I'm excited to be entering a time when I can like offer more. And I did do a one-on-one video reading session with someone like a week ago, and it
Wow.
went very well. And in a way, I kind of credit our conversation because even talking to you on this subject at length, I feel like on video kind of primed me for being able to kind of like find a stream with someone else and find some more ease and comfort there. So for me, it's like I can do it. Like I do a YouTube video series with the lab. Like I, but diving in is just hard for me forever. A lot of people are like that.
I mean,
So,
I really, I mean, I think that I don't know if we were still in lockdown, but like that's kind of how I started working with people was through Zoom.
mhm.
And having that, like, I would always make sure I was like, okay, I just want to make sure you have a glass of water, you know, in a vessel that's not plastic, and it was this kind of triangulation method to be able to like connect us because, we're
Yes.
so much water inside our bodies and then we're,
Mhm.
ingesting it at the same time. I mean, in a very real way, I mean, writing is has been my saving grace in terms of being able to get my ideas out there. So, I think I would like to do more of that. Like I want to incorporate, and maybe that will be how I recognize or facilitate these 1, 2, and 3 card spreads. I don't know. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if I mean I just tried them for during that event that I was telling you about, and it felt really great. The timing was reasonable, and we were able to get a lot accomplished in a sense. Like I felt like there was a real synergy. The energy was high, the vibration, it just felt good. And none
Mm-hmm.
of these people, maybe I knew one person that I read that day, but everybody else I'd never met them before.
Yeah.
And it was a really, like, I because so much of my art practice is performative, and as a Black woman, I think that there is a performativity to how we have to present ourselves in the world to
Hmm.
try to that I think that there is an awareness of it, that has influenced the way that I approach tarot,
Mm-hmm.
and that it is uh yeah, that it is a collaborative experience, which I know that you feel there's a similar thread in your practice too. But like, I definitely think that my ability to communicate to like an audience, even if it's of one, is something that is like very culturally based. I was just telling
Mm-hmm.
somebody about we were passing a church or something like that, and I was just thinking about the performativity of the Easter speech or the Christmas speech. Like, this is very much rooted in the Black church, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
evangelical or Baptist or whatever. But it's like you can't be 5-year old just saying your Easter speech. You must perform it. And it didn't matter
Mm-hmm.
if you were shy. In fact, if you were shy, there was going to be a lot of performativity surrounding you so that you could make it through the speech. So I think
Mm.
that all of those things in it inhabits almost all the things that I do. Even the
Hmm.
way that I write sounds like, people can hear, like I've heard this often, they can hear my voice saying it as they're reading
Hmm.
it. So I
Yeah.
I think that I definitely want to like give truth to that, but also consider like what it's like when I'm actually like writing in my journal, like
Right.
my because I have like, well, I mean it's kind of collapsed, but it's like this is like the kind of stuff that I do, like different spreads, and I'm always doing it with this like watercolor because it feels more, I mean, fluid. They're just
Mm-hmm.
it like it. Sometimes I'll even wet the paper so that it does the thing that watercolors do,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So
Um, what I think is interesting about doing things strictly in writing, because you mentioned about a collaborative process, and so this is one of these things that is a bit cultural within different traditions and also within individuals, but like for a lot of my background as a reader, I really leaned into the idea that you're what by doing a reading, you're opening up a collaborative space with somebody, and that there should be like a lot of questions and a lot of input from the querent, and like a lot of um, just like that was where I started, because I thought in my brain that was a lot that was tied into how tarot worked, um, and the part of the value of somebody getting to like open up and discuss and share things, because as people so often say, like a lot of this is kind of like people turn to these readings as a kind of a therapeutic practice a lot of the time.
Yes.
And so first of all, doing things purely in writing eliminated that entirely. And so now I was like, it's more like dictating the results of like a divination. So I'm like, this is the card, this is what I have for you. And what's funny is in the practice that I've developed over the years, I'm not saying that I'm not open to it. Like obviously some sessions with different people will be different, but my general practice these days does involve a lot more talking than it used to. And it's part of it is coming into my own in terms of what I believe is happening during a divination and where I think it's coming from. And I feel like I'm really trying to take more authority and be like, you could have done this with anyone, but you have chosen to come to me. And I am inviting you into my process. And then the cards are what they are. And while there is some room for interpretation or exploration together, I am by and large kind of dictating like what is here. And what and there's kind of like one of the things I think is advantageous about that is it helps me specifically avoid some of like the cold reading techniques that I'm always a little more leery of, even watching myself for. So I'm not like listening to what someone says and then looking for it in the cards and like creating this feedback loop of like, you know, confirming something they've said and earning their trust. And I'm not, that can be done skillfully, constructively, you know, for a nice holistic reading. But there has been something as a test for my own abilities and my technique to be like, here is what is here. This is what the cards are saying to me. And my understanding of the cards, like yours, is pretty singular. Like I'm not just my interpretation of certain things is going to be a lot different than other people's. So if you're here for a reading with me, you should hopefully want to hear about what that is, you know? And so I think some of it just comes from age and experience, and also a lot of work with boundaries, because in the past I had a lot of people-pleasing instincts that I brought to this. And I was so like nervous about making sure that somebody was comfortable and that they were engaged throughout and that they felt listened to. And I
That's
still care about all of those things, but I need to feel like there's a reason why I'm doing this for you instead of someone else. You
you
know,
know,
like,
I I I just accept that the connection is based, like I trust it. I
mm-hmm,
don't need any, like if we are having a session together,
mm-hmm,
then my expectation is, or maybe even the stipulation is that you trust my interpretation, because I tell them, I said, all I can do is read.
right,
Like you know, and oftentimes when I'm having a reading, um like sometimes people will ask me a couple of questions sprinkled in, but most of the time they are just kind of absorbing.
yes,
They're kind of just absorbing. And then because I preface the reading oftentimes with these these don't have the ability to lie to you.
mm-hmm,
They don't. That's not what they're in, that's what not what they're vested in. And so I ask the seeker, the querent, the person, allow this to be truth in its mere existence,
mm-hmm,
and accept what feels connected, reject what doesn't. And what's, so interesting is how often people are, and I don't ask them to tell me like how it's resonant. I'm like, you can if you want. Most people do. They give me a little bit of something. Um, Sometimes people's responses are quite emotional,
mm-hmm,
and and I still have like, but for whatever reason, because I know from my own personal relationship that it can go there, and that it doesn't like when I read for myself, like one of the things that I was learning and being very specific by is to not try to like retrofit the card to something that's gonna like,
Right.
you know what I mean? And so I
Of
think that
course.
that practice has been really helpful, because even when someone's having an obvious response, but I'm not finished with the sentence, so to speak,
Yes.
I can continue forward. And in many ways, it's helped me create more consistent boundaries in my own life, because I similarly have people pleasing tendencies,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, but for some reason, this practice has given me, and maybe it's because I came at it at this particular time in my life and the life of what was going on in the world too, that
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, I that's not what they're there for, and like it's also been helpful for me to do these readings where people pay what they will. Like, not saying
Mm-hmm.
that I won't, and I do, like I mentioned before, I have like a couple of boundaries with that, but it's been interesting to see how that has um disabled that very common um tendency in myself.
Hmm.
So, I I like, one, interacting with people. I like having that um I like having that dialogue. Um and then I'm certainly intrigued by what it would look like where it's like I just pull a card and then I like write something about it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, based upon
It,
like that. That's something I want to definitely explore.
yeah. It's tricky because I like no, like, so many people, this is a very common pastime. People have their own, like a lot of the people you end up reading for may have experience with the cards themselves. And that's what I think, like the boundaries and the authority as a reader is so important, because also I don't want to end up in a kind of a tug of war or a negotiation with someone about what their reading is. Because I'm like, if you wanted to hire me to draw cards for you so that you could decide what those cards meant, why am I here? You
Right.
know? Like
Right.
it's like and I'm not saying, I don't even think people consciously do this, but people, when there's unease or like a question or an issue, like people are, and I'm not excluding myself, are constantly trying to take control of the story, and I love reading for people who have that openness and like are willing to like submit to like, the input that seems like why you would hire somebody to read cards for you. It's
Right.
harder with somebody like, I can't tell you how many times someone has like come to me with a question about something like how uncomfortable they are with their work situation. They like want to know what to do about it. And then like the cards come up and everything in the card says something about finding a different work situation. And then there's just like this endless cascade of like rationalizations about why that's not an option at this time. And I'm just like, like it's very interesting to people who if people didn't have problems, they likely wouldn't come looking for us in the first place. But as a reader, the challenge of reading face to face or over video is kind of assessing somebody's receptivity and doing what you can to like cultivate greater receptivity so that you can like reach them and be heard, and then and then to maintain a sense of control. um, it doesn't, I'm not saying it's like hierarchical, like I used the word dictate earlier and that sounds really forceful. However, this is my personal practice. I could sit at home and just not do this and enjoy the benefits of it, like we talked about in the last conversation.
100%.
So yeah, so when you like the great thing about working slowly over time and building up clientele is that I think that you get a lot of people who really understand who you are and develop fair expectations of just like what the experience could be like, or are
Yes.
open to being positively surprised, you know?
I think that that has been a big part of the practice for me. I think that people have because I was doing the lives with the etymological tarot
Mm-hmm.
for like probably, some months before I even was like, you know what, I'm gonna, move it to this space. So I think that a lot of people found comfort in that because they were getting something from me just
Yes.
like going through the etymological journey of that.
Yes.
And and this is probably connected to the relatively short period of time that I've been sharing readings. But I've only had like maybe two people that it was just resistance, resistance, resistance. And
Immune. They were immune to you.
yeah, and I was just like, I'm no. And
Yeah.
then that's when I started like, prepping people like they can't lie to you. This is an opportunity for you to, like I mentioned before, like I think of them, even though this is energetic and spiritual for me, I also find myself very connected to the analytical nature of the
Hmm.
possibilities of the symbols that are represented. And I'm like, they're not trying to hurt you, and I need you to be open to the truth of them before we even
Right.
get started. Because if not, then, you know, time is valuable. It's the only thing that it's the only currency that we all have equal, um, equal, naivete of. Like nobody knows. And
Right.
so I take it very, very seriously. And I've been doing I do like the first when I have the big portrait reading, I do the first operation, and something usually pops out, which is great. Like, we're talking, we're drinking some water, we're having that exchange, even though it's through a camera and the digital space. Um, and then usually a card pops out. And then I say, this is just going to symbolize you for this moment. So that
Mm-hmm.
like is like a baby step into like, okay, this is symbolic, like to really impress upon myself in my own practice and others that these are symbols. Like, if we're talking about like like birds evolved like in the forms that they are before we evolved in the forms that we are. And
Mm-hmm.
so these are like, you're talking about like things like snails and salamanders and irises and flower, all kind of roses and flowers and snakes and sun and moon. You're talking about these things that are so much older than we are.
Yeah. Isn't it so funny that all of these things are older than we are, and then we just show up and decide what they mean with like this complete naive sense of authority?
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing to impress. It's like we made it up.
Yeah.
But because it's so old, there is power in it because so
Right.
many people have repeated it, and it makes it even more solidified in our collective
Um,
human consciousness.
Before we get too far from this, you just
Okay.
mentioned the etymological tarot,
Mm,
and your analytical process. And I think this is a great way to segue into talking about just explaining to people about what that is. And it's etymological, not entomological, because you're
right,
not an
not
insect
bugs.
specialist. But so why don't you just share a little bit about that and how it came to be and what you do with it.
I was running into a lot of trouble because uh we hear a lot of slogans because we live in this capitalist society, and so it's a lot of words
Hmm.
that get repeated. And I was like, okay, there must be something deeper. Like you ever see you I know you've seen that Princess Bride, and there's that moment where he's like, he keeps on saying inconceivable, and he's like, but I
Hmm.
don't think you know what that word really means, and
Yeah.
I've always thought that that was, funny from just a comedic standpoint, but it also like continues to resonate. Like sometimes, like, you and I are writers, so like, it's not beyond the pale that we would read a lot. So like a lot of
Hmm.
times when I'm writing, I'll write a word that I don't use in my normal conversation, and but I must have read it or been exposed to it some time ago. And I'll look it up just to make sure. And I mean, oftentimes it is exactly what I'm like, how did I even know that word? So I was like, okay, so if I know that that could happen, that I could accidentally, pull a word that is very accurate to the
Hmm.
feeling that I'm trying to convey, what about the words that are proselytized to us all the time? Do I really know the meaning of that word? And so I started, like, things like institution I was looking up, and hierarchy I was looking up, and a task I was looking up, because I was hearing it repeatedly, and then I was thinking about how important words are for spells, like, spelling and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, well, I know that I usually know one definition, but many words have like at least two or three definitions for the
Hmm.
same word, same spelling, everything. And I was like, okay, so that's another layer. But then this other layer was the etymology, which is like, okay, this is the DNA of the word, and that is the essential quality of the spell. So if there is going to be this emphasis on this word over and over again, I want to know what that core nugget is.
Right.
So that's, and I was just writing. I don't know what made me get these little note cards. I got them from Amazon or something. And they were these little note cards, and they were like brightly colored. And I would write out the etymological tarot on these cards. Or I would, the, when I was doing my research, I would write them so I could like kind of do them like flashcards. And
Hmm.
so one day I, instead of doing them horizontally, I did them vertically, and it just right. It looked like I was like, and I would have these, maybe some of them would be only like 5 cards. Some of them would be like 11 cards. Some of them would then then sometimes you'd get to the Proto-Indo-European root, and it had this whole list of words that it's a part of. And so
Hmm.
it was starting to look very much, as I was laying them out and looking at them, it started looking like a tarot spread. And so I
Uh-huh.
just like, let me just imagine it in that way. And so that's how I got started.
And so this is now something, so you do these readings for people.
I haven't done any for an individual yet. I've been wanting
Uh-huh.
to, um, like,
Maybe we'll do it on a upcoming conversation. That would be a good way to pick, just to try it out and see what happens.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
I would be down.
I'm definitely like, I'm thinking, one, this could be a really interesting way to maybe um play around with what a rubric could look like if we were like working on it together, because, you know, your your consistent practice with other people is so rooted in wordsmithing. And
Hmm.
I've been, I am a like a baby in comparison to your practice. Um,
Huh.
like with these, but it's like it would be interesting to see what your word would be, and
Hmm.
how that, because that's some of those etymological spreads have inspired a spread that I've done with a traditional deck.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
the kinds of questions, like sometimes it'll be like, I don't know if I have one around here, but like, one of them, like the last one I did, I think was excellent. I think
Okay.
that was the
That was
last
like
spread.
the core word.
Yeah, that was the starting phrase. And then it went to where did I put it? Here we go. So it started out with superiority, greatness, and distinction. So I would probably come up with, like, the first position would be something that connects with that. And then the next one was from the present participle of excellere from Latin, which is surpass, be superior, to rise, be eminent. So it's like, okay, what is about to be imminent, or a question or a query that's connected to that. And then but what was really intriguing was when you break it apart, when it's ex and silare, which is ex is of course out and from, but also upwards and completely deprive. So that kind of
Hmm.
completely deprive, that's something that I would like to explore in a reading, because there is, oftentimes when we are trying to figure something out, there is a feeling of deprivation, that something is being kept from us.
Yes. Or
So,
that like in order to excel that you would have to deprive someone else of something, you know.
so
Uh
I go ahead.
I was just going to say that this is fascinating to me because basically you are like, a word witch, and that
Yeah,
in
yes,
general, the tarot deck is presented as this like symbolic framework that's connected to like elemental water, right? It's like things emerging from the unconscious that can
yep,
be made conscious and then discussed and analyzed. And the etymological tarot project is the reverse of that, because it's taking it's like elemental air work where you are analyzing and picking apart and then creating space for symbols to emerge from there. So it's like this would be very, very useful for people whose primary experience of life and awareness is more analytical, who maybe struggle with trusting the way that tarot works.
yes,
Like this is like a whole
yes.
kind of special divination system by itself, or like a gateway into tarot for people whose mind just works differently.
100%, because I think often, I mean, I am a Gemini, so and I have, like, there's a lot of air in my chart, so it's like, and a friend of mine, I was telling her about something that happened to me. I mean, something that was like really, really devastating, actually. And I was like, totally, I was putting it in, I was intellectualizing my feelings. And
Hmm.
until she had said that, I didn't realize that, like, that is something that I've done. I mean, I think part of it is just the where I'm placed, like coming to the planet. Another part is that it has definitely been a what's that thing? Defense mechanism.
Uh-huh.
It's been protective. And I'm like, okay, I want to I want to allow myself to feel the things, but I don't want to berate myself for holding it in that space. Like,
Hmm.
I think that the first time that I really even thought about that was when I I was pulling the Three of Swords a lot for a period of time. And my research was was talking about how it's suspend like a passion suspended in the intellectual realm and how
Hmm.
painful that actually is. And I was like, when I saw that symbol, it really broke open something for me. It allowed
Hmm.
me, like I recognized that moment of even being reconnected with the tarot through that moment in the bookstore where I'm crying my eyes out because I miss my mama. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, these are powerful things, like the energy of fire, the subconscious power of emotions and water, the intellectual capabilities of air, and the material behavioral aspects of the pentacles and the earth. These are um these are elements to be nurtured and balanced and turn the volume up and really um enjoying. It's like a
Hmm.
balanced meal. And so these symbols and these
Right.
cards help me get there.
And they're also not something necessarily that can be escaped, which is why you had said when we were chatting about what to talk about in upcoming
Mm.
conversations, you wanted to talk about the so-called, bad or scary cards that people worry about. And we will definitely have to talk about them at length at some point. But that's what I think is so interesting too, is that a lot of when people come to a reading, whether they're really well versed in the cards or not, there's often a situation of like avoidance also. And like I consider myself like to be like a triage artist when it comes to the cards, because I don't read reversals, which is,
Mm.
for anyone listening, when the card is upside down, I don't
Me neither.
all my cards are read right side up, because I've read a lot about it, and really I just think there is no like card in the deck that I think of as like strictly benevolent for all situations, or strictly, malevolent. And getting to talk, like, these are gateways to talking about pain or fear or anxiety, or some of which may be necessary or constructive, and some of which may be unnecessary or destructive, and like that is all to be discussed in the reading itself. And it doesn't happen to me very often when I'm reading with someone who I don't know very well, or like who is like a total stranger. But one person at that event I did last year really, she only got a reading because her friend did, and which is always a great way into an awkward conversation with a total stranger. But and some of the cards that came up weren't even super intense, but like there was definitely a sense that like the power of the image was so great that like no matter what I said about it, it sounded like I was trying to rationalize it or just like make her feel better about it. And it kind of shut out the possibility of explaining um like what the meaning of the card is. And that isn't helped by the fact that a lot of the popular resources about tarot just repeat very uncritically a lot of the same stereotypes, and like when a card is reduced in meaning, to a sentence or two or a cluster of words in a booklet, and that becomes the core of someone's impression, because they might find lots of really interesting, beautiful, or useful ways of articulating that word cluster into like their readings and expanding upon it, but it's still based on such a limited understanding of what's contained there. And that is simply not what the tradition of this tool is,
I,
right?
I could not agree with you more. Like I think that one sentence explanation, as someone who is approaching this like through not only the time that I've committed to like being specific about the images that I see, but
Mm-hmm.
also knowing about a lot of those symbols beforehand. Like I'm like, no, there's a like, or like I think about something like the rose, which finds itself in a number of cards, like
Mm-hmm.
the death card being one of them, for example. And but the rose not only as a rose, as a flower, but as an alchemical symbol,
Hmm.
or the fact that my dad has like a number of rose bushes, and they require actually a lot, and you have to be constantly pruning them. You have to be and it's fascinating, like when you learn, like, oh yeah, you got to cut it at a certain position so that
Uh-huh.
the other one will bloom. And it's like these are the types of things that aren't in the
Right.
the explanation, that as
Right.
someone who is committed to the practice and the understanding of these symbols are going like there's a lot going on in all of the cards. A
This
lot.
is why it's so valuable. I think, like, I also don't want to poop on anyone else's experience. Like, I think it's important to explore what readings are like when you get them from baby readers. And it's also
Mhm.
interesting to explore what kind of readings you get from just like, you know, boardwalk, sideshow hustlers. And like all, but also I'm excited that between like, you know, the kind of renaissance in all of these things and also social media and so forth, there is more learning. There are so many more experienced, established people, you know, who really have tapped into unique avenues of this subject. And
Yes.
some of them are very accessible and some of them are frustratingly inaccessible. And as someone who has been less accessible, you know, over the years, like, I've had my own curious relationship with this where I'm just like, I'll see somebody do or say something that isn't like, I'll just say it, that I think is wrong, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
because some things are wrong, you know, some things are a matter of opinion and some things are wrong or like like presented out of context in a way that I see as like very preventably um wrong.
Yeah.
And I grapple with this a lot because I'm like, I don't, it should not be part of my practice to go out and correct people. The best I can do is like be the best advertisement for my perspective that I can and hope that some people will want it, or if someone has a question that they will ask me. And then that part of that involves being non-judgmental enough to where someone isn't going to expect that I'm just going to be delighted that they're wrong. You know, like you actually have to be, you have to uh, present yourself with the wisdom that is supposed to accompany like a long-term practice. And that's, you know, it's not always easy. But so you know, and before I don't want to go too far over our kind of like hour mark where we did last time, but I will
Yeah.
say that in terms of like accessibility for readings, one of the things I would like to share a little about, I'll talk more about my specific like, you know, technique or processes stuff later. But I've spent the last couple of years in this kind of like anxiety knot because I really didn't want people to DM me for readings.
Mm.
Like I would get like, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, a coworker of mine wants a reading. Like, you know, can I have her contact you?" And I was like, "Okay." And then she DM'd me and wanted to know what my availability was within the 36 hours. And I was like, "This just isn't how I work at my best, and it's not how I want to work." And so I really agonized over this, and I decided that. So, I probably showed you, but like these coins that I have, you've seen
Yes.
them floating around.
I'm so cute. I want to know more.
So for those who are maybe purely listening in the audio, okay, so and this is something that I adapted in response to the way that stuff like with divination and occult services and whatever happen online. Because everyone's out there hustling and doing readings on TikTok and like DMing you and wanting to like have like a cheap disposable reading immediately. And good for everyone who can make that work, especially if you can get that coin. But like for me, it's just much more important that I work with the kind of people that I know that I can work with. And so
Hmm.
I worked with a friend of mine who designs jewelry, and we created these triangular coins. I have a brass one and I have like a silver one. And my goal was to so the earth element prioritizes slowness. Things can happen suddenly with the earth element, but like overall, it's like seasonal geological shifts. And the speed of the way communication happens online is kind of what was so unpleasant to me in terms of developing connections and readings for people. Like, does it even matter? Even if I can get the money from them and then we talk and we have a Zoom, and like, will they listen? Because I feel that when it comes to deeper wisdom and the kind of work that I can do, that I think it has value. And it's like, how do you convince someone of that when they really just like intellectually want something, you know, and haven't deeply considered it? So the way I work now is I am only available for I'm doing my like, you know, emails, which anyone like sign up for if they contact me. Like, you can DM me and ask me like, you know, to get your weekly or monthly emails. That's fine. For full sessions, I only give services in exchange for these coins. You have to buy the coin from me online. I mail you the coin. And then when you want to redeem it for your session, you mail it back to me. And then when I receive the coin in the mail, we book the session, you know? So it's like, it slows things down. It's like, is this something that I want to spend my coin on? It's like I'm on retainer for you and you can redeem me with this coin, but it does take some time. There's the additional expense of having to like mail it back to me. And then the silver coin is worth 5 sessions. And so you buy the silver coin, it costs more money. And then like I'm doing like the brass coin costs $60. That's one session.
Wow, that's amazing.
The silver coin is I'm selling for $260, and you hold on to it, and you we can go ahead and start booking once you buy it, because oh my God, you just gave me $260. So right. Sure. But like, and then you send it back to me ahead of booking the 5th and final session. And so there's an exchange between us, kind of like you're talking about, like, how do you involve someone in your process at the pace that you want? And then, so I had a number of these made, and I was really nervous about unleashing this on people because I thought, like, it's so elaborate. But I want, like, the people who hear about this and find it interesting or intriguing or attractive are the people that I want to work with. And the kind of people who are like, that is slow, cumbersome, you know, I don't get it, like, whatever. I'm like, that's fine. There are literally a zillion people out there that you can talk to.
And it's so great because, like, while you're thinking about it, you could wear it. And it's like this, you know, this opportunity to kind of like have that exchange. I mean, I'm not on that level, but I do make like, I don't schedule the session until they pay. They have to pay first. So money it's like front. You know, because I'm like, I'm going to be doing all this like preparation for you. And, you know, I think some people feel like they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, I'm not in the space where I want to, you know, because it's varied widely. And I've been okay with all of them. Like every payment that I've got, I've never felt gypped. I've never felt like, you know what I mean? Because I'm going to bring that same energy to this moment regardless. Like, it's not about, it's really to get them connected to the symbology. Like, it's about the currency that you're
literal currency,
literal currency that you're committing. And disco.
Go on. Sorry, go on.
But yeah, I think that's lovely. I think it's
now
amazing.
That I'm a coin operated fortune teller.
I love like it's official.
it's official. And what I think is great about it too is that it's just like, I mean, I needed to do this for me. And that's the thing too. Like, this isn't a level that I want necessarily that I think other people need to get on either. Like, we talked a little bit about my own anxieties, my own ways that I needed to like compensate for like facility that I didn't have in certain areas. Even that people-pleasing instinct that we talked about a bit was useful here, because once someone has bought one of these, then I'm like much more inclined to want to make good, because like it's like a gesture of faith in me, and then I want to like make sure that that is rewarded, You know, so
Yes.
if someone bought something from me that was worth $60 or $260, and I don't care if it's been 5 years and I all spent up the money and it's long forgotten about, like I still have like a commitment that I made that is consecrated in like a literal like earthen form,
Yes.
literal pentacle, you know, and
Yes.
that
Yes.
is something that came from me. And so when I like it, I just feel really especially inclined to like make good on it and give them, you know, their money's worth. It's a kind of
Yeah.
a nice tool of accountability for me, because I hate the idea of begrudgingly going through the motions of what I think people expect in terms of booking and having a reading, and then just kind of not, you know, not shining or living up to it. So
Yeah.
that's my availability currently.
I
So
love
in
it.
the short term, if people are listening and they're like, I would like to have a tarot reading from one of these two as soon as possible, I definitely recommend that they hit you up. Because
Right.
they can, you know, like, first of all, you're looking for work, and second of all, you're much more comfortable working with people on shorter notice, and like, you know, you have this remarkable facility with like, even if there's a performance element to it, like you said, it's like a hat that is comfortable to you by
Yes.
now.
Yes.
And I'm a much more awkward person
Yeah.
overall. And I have I have unsurprisingly developed a much more elaborate and perhaps uncomfortable, you know, way of meeting people. And those out there who are also uncomfortable will maybe find that especially appealing. So, you know, we're definitely on, you know, opposite sides of the coin here in terms of like who we're reaching and like what we're doing right now.
Well, I mean,
Um,
hopefully, I will say this, you know, because we're all having a human experience, I hope that like
mhm.
that as you know, we continue to have these conversations and learn from one another. I mean, I'm certainly learning from you. I hope that there's something that you feel connected with as well, that there'll be
Oh, big
like some,
time.
you know, there'll be some overlap because, you know, we are presenting so differently, but
Yes.
we are utilizing this tool as a way to kind of like almost like a translator. And you know, the positive and or even the perilous possibilities that are present in any kind of anybody's reading, you know, that's something that I feel like we're similarly engaged in. And, you know, however you want it, you know, I hope it, you know, I hope it connects, you know.
Oh yeah, there's just so many different ways to slice this lunch meat.
Yeah.
And I think that so, you know, last time when we wrapped up the last hour that we recorded, we talked a little bit about the Fool card as like the initial, you know, leap of faith of getting started. And this is not something that I want to necessarily be beholden to as we progress, but I was thinking about the theme of that and moving on to, you know, number one and the Magician card, and how we have like, you know, focused on ourselves as practitioners, you know, or each other as practitioners, but like how
Yeah.
like your solo relationship with your craft and how that determines like what other people see and like the expectations they form, and what a kind of a fertile area that is to play in to present something that is like uniquely yourself. So that's something that I think that you definitely shared today in just like the little sprinkle we got of what your, you know, your path has been. And that's like, you know, I me opening up about how obstructive I am on purpose is also part of that. So like, you know, there is a sort of a magician undercurrent to this episode. And
I will certainly agree with that,
yeah.
especially with all those tools on the table.
Right, all the tools on the table. And then that sets us up possibly to, you know, record next time from the perspective of the priestess. And I like that because that is such like a nebulous card of, you know, hidden voices that pretty much
Yeah.
anything that we talk about can be retrofitted to count as that theme.
100. It's the mysteries. It's the
Right,
mysteries.
right.
Hmm.
Exactly. I will both be very at home there, I feel. So
because I don't know.
should we? I don't know. Talk to me then, and we'll see what I'm at home with. Sometimes it would help if things were a little plainer. But if we want to wrap up here today, I want to take this opportunity to do a proper close where, you know, you say out loud, you know, where people can find you and all of the requisite stuff that comes with talking to people for an hour and then hopefully leaving them with the desire for more.
Indeed. Well, you can always hit me up on IG. I'm at Kenya, Kenya 9, the number 9.
Easy enough.
Easy
I am
peasy.
also, yes, I'm on there as Here Lies Bloom, and we are simultaneously sharing these recordings on your YouTube channel
Yep.
and also the YouTube channel of Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, which I run. And I
Yes.
didn't talk to anybody about posting stuff there. I've just been doing it.
I just been tagging them.
So that there's a couple, you know, you can support both channels. And then I also have been released the audio version of this on the Substack that I have with Eric Shorey, which is called Judgment. And it's not a tarot themed Substack per se, although we have covered it at times, but there is a podcast feature on our Substack that has been languishing. So I thought, why not I have an MP3 and I have a platform. So if you're listening to this through the Judgment platform or the Substack platform because of Judgment, that's great. We're happy for that. And also I wanted to point out that on YouTube has closed captioning available for people who want to be able to like read along. We don't have transcripts figured out that way. I'm looking at options for that, but like, you know, it seems unlikely that we were ever going to even get this going. So one thing at a time.
But we did. We did.
Yes, we did. 2 down. And so that's great. Let's wrap up here for today. And then we'll talk again very soon.
Talk again soon. Bye, y'all.
Priestess style. Bye.